Hassan Rouhani reviewing the military parade this morning here in Tehran. Well, let's cross over to our correspondent on the ground there at the military parade, Yusuf Jalali, who's on the scene. Well, Yusuf, tell us about what's going on there this morning.
Well, Marzia, what you see behind me is one of the largest military parades staged by the Iranian army south of Tehran in a place called the Mausoleum, in front of the mausoleum of the late founder of the Islamic Republic, Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini. The Iranian army today in Tehran and across the country, in major cities across the country, are staging large-scale military parade as a show of might and preparedness of the Iranian army. So different divisions and units of the Islamic Republic of Iran army are staging parades. The army's Navy, ground forces, and the Air Force of the Iranian army are staging parades. At the beginning of this large-scale parade, which marks the National Army Day, the 40th anniversary of the establishment of the Islamic Republic Army, President Hassan Rouhani delivered a speech where he extolled the virtues and the achievements of the Iranian army and their great role in bringing about so many achievements to the Islamic Republic, including the latest indigenous military hardware, which within a few minutes we're going to witness a parade of the latest achievements, the latest military hardware and technology, which is achieved and produced indigenously by the Iranian armed forces, is going to be staging parades here behind me. So President Hassan Rouhani thanked the Iranian army for its close cooperation with the IRGC, the Islamic Revolution Guards Corps, and he reiterated that different divisions of the Iranian armed forces, including the IRGC and the Iranian army, are close together and are pursuing one single goal of defending the Iranian soil from any potential attack. So, and he also referred to the role of the Iranian army in bringing about stability in the region. And he said that, unlike some countries in the Middle East, the Iranian army and the Iranian armed forces are relying on domestic workforce and are relying on domestic knowledge to build their own domestic and indigenous military hardware. And by this, he probably and apparently he is referring to the to Saudi Arabia, which is buying actually military hardware and is buying arms from the United States. And he said that Iran's state-of-the-art technology in the military sector is all achieved domestically and inside the country, unlike some states which he is referring to and pointing to Saudi Arabia. And he said he condemned actually some regional states for creating turmoil in the region. And he said that he assured the nations that Iran's army is pursuing stability in the region and peace in the region, and assured the regional states in the Middle East that Iran's military might is following and pursuing peace and stability and is seeking deterrence and not aggression. The Iranian today is actually the Iranian National Army Day, which is designated on April 18th to thank the Iranian army and to commemorate the contributions the Iranian army has made to the Islamic Republic, and especially to bringing about and leading the Islamic Revolution to victory back in 1979. As you might know, the Iranian army back in 1979 made major contributions to the victory of the Islamic Revolution by turning its back on the former dictator, the Shah's regime, and jumping on the bandwagon of the revolutionary crowd. At that time, back in 1979, the senior commanders of the Iranian army announced their neutrality in the conflict between the revolutionary guard, between the revolutionary crowd, the public, the Iranian public, and the Shah's regime. And this neutrality was tantamount to announcing their support for the Islamic Revolution, which ultimately led to the victory of the Islamic Revolution back in 1979, which followed a historic speech by the late founder of the Islamic Republic, Ruhollah Khomeini, who said that the Iranian army from now on is referred to as the Popular Army, and the Iranian army, or the Islamic army, which is maintaining close ties with the public. And that historic speech was on April 18th, actually, and which marked the day of the National Army Day. And from that date on, the Islamic Republic of Iran across the country marks this day and commemorates this day as the National Army Day, during which nationwide celebrations is held, including large-scale parades by different units of the Iranian army across the country. So this large-scale parade is not only going on inside Tehran, in the capital, but also across the country, in different cities across the country. So what we are going to expect today is that the latest state-of-the-art military equipment and hardware produced indigenously by the Iranian armed forces are going to be put on display. So just a few minutes ago, around 60 helicopters from the Iranian army were hovering around during Hassan Rouhani's speech. And right now, as you see behind me, the latest achievements of the Iranian army, the latest technology of the Iranian army are put on display. So the Iranian armed forces were, for 4 decades, were suffering from the West's arms embargo, and that's led to the self-sufficiency of the Iranian armed forces in producing indigenous military hardware. So those 4 decades of armed sanctions of the Iranian armed forces led to the country trying to stand on its feet and produce its own essential military equipment. So Iran has recently made great achievements in producing indigenous and homegrown military equipment, and it is not just conventional military equipment, but also Iran has managed to build high-tech military hardware, including some drones, unmanned aerial vehicles, and the ballistic missiles, which the West keeps blaming the Islamic Republic for producing ballistic missiles, which Iran keeps saying that it is non-negotiable. Producing military equipment is a must for protecting the country from potential attacks, so it is non-negotiable, because Iran was a country which suffered 8 years of the Iraqi-imposed war on the country, which was waged by Iraq, but was supported by a lot of other countries, including the West and the United States in particular. So the country has suffered an imposed war during which the army made great contributions to defend the country and defend the Iranian sovereignty and defend the Iranian soil from Iraq's aggression at that time. So Iran, whenever it comes to the U.S. blaming the country or trying to accuse the country of creating instability in the region by referring to Iran's ballistic missiles, Iran says and argues that it has to defend itself from potential attacks, not only because of having the experience of 8-year imposed war by Iraq, but also because currently the region is in turmoil. We see the neighbors of Iran, most of the neighboring countries, like Syria, like Iraq, Afghanistan, the region is under, the region is in turmoil. In Syria, in Yemen, Saudi Arabia is attacking Yemen.
All right, Yusuf, stay with me. Let me. I know it's difficult for you to hear me.
Needs to protect itself from potential attack.
All right, thanks, Yusuf. Of course, we're going to be checking back with Yusuf as the military parade continues to be underway. Now, crossover right here in Tehran, joined by Said Mustafa Khoshchesh, a political analyst in Tehran. Thank you so much for being with us. Your perspective, tell us the importance of basically this military parade and having a strong military by the Islamic Republic, especially these days.
Hello, Marzia, and thanks for having me. Well, I need to correct at first that I'm traveling from Tabriz to Ardabil, northwestern Iran. First, the main point is that Iran is situated in a very sensitive region in the Middle East. We know that most energy supplies go through this region, and that's why it's the focus. It is at the center of attention of the world powers and all the world countries. So it's very important to everyone. Now, especially at the present juncture, when Donald Trump is filling the region with various types of his beautiful missiles and weapon systems, the threat that is posed to independent countries like Iran, or the ones that are involved in a war against proxy forces of the United States, like Iraq, Syria, and Lebanon, and others. It's a very sensitive juncture. So these countries need to have a very robust and powerful military system and weapon systems in order to keep the balance in place, in order to deter enemies from threatening them. And their military power actually is somehow a main factor for keeping peace in the region and to keep security, maintained in this region. So it's very important for Iran to have a very powerful military, army, IRGC, and others, in order to show that enemies of the country cannot attack it. And if Iran were weak, then we would have been, under constant threats, serious threats of military action. And the same fate would be, waiting for us, the same fate that of those countries like Afghanistan and Iraq and Syria would be waiting for us. So it's very important for this country to be powerful in military terms.
And Mustafa, we see the situation now seems more sensitive than usual. Of course, we've seen the country under continual attack, at least rhetoric-wise, anyway, since 1979. But I want to talk about Iran's power in the region. Do you think that that is playing an even bigger role in the rate of the aggression by powers such as the U.S. And others? Because, of course, with the situation that's taking place in Syria, that this was a big defeat for the United States and those it supports. Do you see the U.S. become more aggressive against Iran, and do you think it is related to Iran's power not only in the region but globally?
Oh, yes, it's very important. As a matter of fact, another point which is very important with regard to Iran's military power and powerful military and army is that its military is serving global peace and security. We know that this region has been under attack by various terrorist groups that are nurtured, trained, and supplied with arms by Saudi Arabia, by Turkey, and many other nations that are allies to the United States, including Israel. And this has been admitted by a number of U.S. officials, former and present U.S. officials, including Joe Biden, Michael Flynn, and others, who have all admitted that their allies are responsible for the spread of terrorism in this part of the world. The same terrorist groups that are operating actually in Syria and in Iraq, they have been killing people all throughout the world, in Malaysia, in the Philippines, even in China. they have claimed, to be establishing a new caliphate of Wahhabi terrorist groups in there, and they've been killing people in Europe, various parts of Europe. And the countries that are standing to the same terrorist groups and killing them are only Iran, Syria, Russia, along with Hezbollah and Popular Forces of Iraq. They have been, clamping down on ISIL and other Wahhabi takfiri terrorist groups like An-Nusra, Ahrar, and others, in order to, keep peace, not just in this part of the world, in the region, not just for themselves, but for Europeans who've been being killed by these terrorist groups. So they should be thankful to these countries rather than bombing them, like what happened last week by France, the United States, and Britain, who punished Bashar al-Assad and his army for standing up to the terrorists, the same terrorists that are killing people in Paris, in Nice, in London, everywhere. And Iran's power, along with Russia, these two have been standing up to these terrorist groups. So it shows that the more powerful they are, the more stability we would see in this region and in the whole world. Contrary to what we see with regard to the United States, contrary to what we see with regard to the European nations, I mean the trio, France, Germany, and also Britain, who are misusing their power in violation of the UN Charter, in violation of the UN Security Council, in violation of all international rules and regulations. They attack independent nations, sovereign nations, with the help of their military power. Their allies in the region, Israel, is going the same path. They're doing the same thing. Israel bombed Syria, not just for the first time, but it has done that several times so far. It's been killing Iranian advisors in there, and it has admitted in a New York Times report, it has been acknowledged by senior military officials of Israel that they had planned to hit Iranian targets in Syria in order to increase tensions in the
Mustafa,
region.
sorry to interrupt you. Thank you so much for contributing to this morning. Appreciate it. Said Mustafa Khosheshi out of Tehran. Viewers, you're looking at these live images coming out of Tehran this morning, and the military parade on Army Day here in Iran.
You can see missiles put on display in the course of the military parade on the National Army Day. And also the expanding presence of the Navy in the high seas has turned this force into a strategic force, a real strategic force. As mentioned by the Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces. You can see Jamaran destroyer. And also Qadir submarine. And Walfajr torpedo. Qadir submarine. Walfajr torpedo. Shahab vessels. As-Sabahat submarine. And a 76mm cannon. These are part of the capabilities of the Army's Strategic Navy Force And the said military hardware and equipment have been manufactured by domestic experts.
و تو ای سرزمین سپهر اورنگ ایران مسلمان غمت مباد که زمین و آسمانت تکیه بر بازوان مردان بیدار دارد، مردانی که از صلابت و مهر جامعه ارتش برتن کردند و با رخساری برتافته از حقیقت و ایمان تکبیرگوی اهریمن شکنند و در برابر تحریم دست برآمده از آستین دشمن استقامت می‌کنیم.
Viewers, you're looking at these live images coming out of Tehran. You're looking at the mausoleum of the late founder of the Islamic Revolution and Islamic Republic, Imam Khomeini. And right outside of the mausoleum is the venue this morning of the military parade commemorating Iran's Army Day. A massive display of military hardware is going to be shown today, and also military forces from throughout the country in different sections, different parts of the army. And of course, we'll be going back to the military parade as deemed necessary. Now, continuing with the